Hi, welcome to Law and Liquor with James, where the legal talk is as smooth as a Macallan 18, and the more I drink, the less you understand. And today, it's Britney, bitch. Today we're talking about Britney, and on special request of my wife, we're drinking apple martinis, which isn't my first choice, but then again, neither is talking about Britney. So, let's talk about it. As we all know, there's a documentary going forward about Britney Spears' conservatorship. And everything goes back to 2008. I reviewed the court documents, and here's what I learned. Back in 2008, if you'll remember, Britney Spears was going through some colorful episodes in her life. Everybody kind of remembers the viral video of her shaving her head. We remember all sorts of odd activities during that time that Britney was kind of exhibiting. But the petition for conservatorship goes back to early 2008, filed by her dad. Just like Dad used to make. I don't know what my dad would make, apple martinis, but there you go. Just like Mama used to make. Take two, take three. Like mother's milk. Back in 2008, when Britney's dad filed the petition for conservatorship, Britney was in the UCLA hospital. The petition itself lists that as her address, which indicates, at least to me, and probably to the court, that Britney had been there for some time, which either means that she was ill or she was really in some sort of mental health hold. I suspect it was the latter because the type of petition that was filed was a petition for conservator of the person. Now, in California, we've got two types of conservatorships. We've got a conservator of the person, and we have a conservator of the estate. A conservator of the person controls everything about where that person lives, who that person interacts with, the medical choices of that person. It's commonly sort of like if you can envision like an advanced healthcare directive, but court imposed. A conservator of the estate is like a financial power of attorney. It's the person who will manage the conservatee's estate. So in this case, at least the initial petition that was filed, Britney's dad had filed a petition for a conservator of the person over Britney Spears. And that meant that he was seeking the ability to control her medical care, control where she lived, the medication she was taking, and in particular, based on some other filings regarding, usually reserved for dementia patients, he also requested the ability to kind of confine her in a lockdown facility for her own safety and treatment. So that was the initial petition that was filed. Now, we have to take a step back and we have to discuss, or in order to understand the Britney Spears conservatorship, you have to understand what a conservatorship is. So a conservatorship is a constitutional process by which your constitutional rights are taken away. Seems kind of odd. So it's a constitutional process where your rights are taken away. Let me explain. When you're under a conservatorship, your rights are actually taken away. You have certain constitutional rights like the right to vote, the right to marry, the right to decide who you interact with, the right to decide what to do with your money, the right to own property, etc. A conservatorship takes away those rights, but because we have the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution, the government, that is the court, can't take away those rights unless you're given due process. So there's a whole conservatorship proceeding that is geared towards taking away those rights, and the process is a Fifth Amendment process so that the person whose rights are taken away, in this case Britney Spears, she would have been given due process through these proceedings. Now, when is a conservatorship needed? Typically, when we think of a conservatorship, we think of someone who has dementia. In fact, there are special forms in California that are specifically dedicated to people who have dementia. And in fact, one of those dementia forms was filed in the Britney Spears case, not because she has dementia, but because usually those forms get filed when somebody is requesting the ability to confine someone who has dementia in sort of a lockdown facility. In Britney Spears' case, it was filed because they were requesting the court's permission to keep Britney in some sort of facility where it's sort of a lockdown mental facility kind of thing. But usually when you're thinking of conservatorship, you're thinking of someone who is ill, someone who might be elderly, someone who might have been born with a neurocognitive disorder, someone who has a disability or who has certain special needs where someone is going to have to be the guardian over them for life. So you might think of somebody who is severely autistic, someone who has Down syndrome, as children whose parents might obtain conservatorships over them. On the other end of the spectrum, you have the elderly who develop dementia or who develop some sort of condition, maybe they're in an accident or something like that, where they're no longer able to take care of their day-to-day needs. So that's the first type of category. If you are incapacitated, meaning you can't actually care for your needs, then a conservatorship is needed. There's a second element or a second category of people where a conservatorship is needed, and this is the category that Britney Spears fell into, at least in 2008. It's the type of people who, even if they have capacity, even if they are perfectly capable of making choices for themselves, even if they're perfectly capable of understanding who they are and what they want to do, for one reason or the other, they're just not able or not willing to take proper care for their either health care or their finances. And on the healthcare side, which is where we see the Britney Spears, at least the initial petitions filed, what the courts look for is the person, in this case is Britney Spears, making choices for her own safety and healthcare that are rational and reasonable and that are going to keep her safe. On the other side, when you're talking about finances, the question the court would ask and what the proposed conservator would have to prove is, does the proposed conservatee, in other words, in this case, does Britney Spears lack the ability to resist fraud and undue influence? So Britney's dad could come in and subsequently did go in and was able to prove to the court that Britney was unable to resist fraud and undue influence, or was making such terrible financial choices that that the court needed to step in and deprive her of the ability to make those choices. And I think Britney's sister, Jamie Lynn Spears, recently came out and kind of weighed in on this and said that she believes that her dad's conservatorship over Britney saved her estate, her financial estate, from bankruptcy, because she believes that without her dad's sort of managing that portion, her estate would have been spent or otherwise frittered away on whatever Britney was frittering things away at that time. Maybe apple martinis, who knows? All right, so in 2008, the dad files the petition. Now, what the dad needed to prove is he needed to prove all those elements we just talked about, but he needed to prove it by clear and convincing evidence. That's the standard in a conservatorship case. It's not like a civil case. In a civil case, like a car accident or something like that, you need to prove your case by preponderance of the evidence, which means, is it more likely than not that what you're saying is true? On the criminal side, which is what everyone's most familiar with, is beyond a reasonable doubt. You've heard that before so many times. Beyond a reasonable doubt, that's a standard of proof. In other words, if you're charged with a crime, the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that whatever the state said you did occurred, right? They got to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. A conservatorship fits between the two of those, and the standard is clear and convincing evidence. So at some point, we know that Britney's dad was granted powers of conservatorship over Britney, which means that a judge looked at the evidence and thought that the evidence was clear and convincing that Britney lacked capacity to make her own decisions, either because of a mental condition or a mental defect, or because she just is incapable of resisting fraud and undue influence. The Free Britney movement points to sort of a setup, right? Because a lot of the evidence against Britney was evidence provided by paparazzi. The theory on that end of the spectrum would be, if you have paparazzi following you around day in and day out, they're going to be able to capture things on camera and on video that suggest you're incapable of managing your finances. And so the Free Britney movement in their arguments is that, hey, wait a minute, all this evidence the court relied on was really just sort of bad luck. You caught Britney in a time of her life where things weren't going so hot, and it made it seem like she was incapable of caring for herself. And whatever the truth is, the court bought it. Fast forward to today. What's surprising for me as an attorney today is that the dad still has the conservatorship. It's one thing to say, hey, court, my daughter is in the hospital and she's not making good choices. She won't take medication that's been prescribed to her. It's one thing to do that and then get a conservatorship for that. It's another thing to say, now after that moment has passed, after the medication has been taken and sort of the condition has been normalized, that the conservatorship persists. And that to me is the most shocking thing, and it's probably the most fascinating thing about the Britney Spears case, is that it continues to persist and that Britney's dad continues to be the conservator. Now, the cynical conspiracy theorist in me, knowing attorneys, knowing how conservatorships work, is that this conservatorship is being egged on by one, Britney's dad, who's getting paid $16,000 a month. If you didn't know that, you should know it. He's getting paid $16,000 a month by court order to manage her estate. So he's got 16,000 reasons every month to come up with reasons why Britney Spears still needs a conservator. The other thing is lawyers. The way lawyers get paid for conservatorships is one of two ways. Either you get a lawyer that says, okay, I'm going to do these things and here's the upfront cost, right? That it's going to cost. Typically when I do a conservatorship, that's what I'm doing. I charge a flat fee. I'll do the petition and we do things like that. Usually in an uncontested conservatorship, that's the way to go. In other cases, the other way is to say, I'm going to get paid a percentage out of the estate or a reasonable fee out of the estate of the person. Now, under normal circumstances, normal families that have children who might need a conservatorship, they might not have a large estate, and so, you know, the attorney might just do, like for example for me, do a flat fee and that's that. But if you have a large estate, if you have a person who has a ton of money, well, the attorney is almost assured that at the end, they're going to get their regular hourly billing rate at $300, $400, $500, $600 an hour, times however much they did, and that gets paid directly by Britney Spears. Yeah, that's right, you heard me right. Britney Spears is actually paying the attorneys who are keeping her under the thumb of her dad at $16,000 a month. So the cynical side in me, knowing how lawyers think, I mean, honestly, like if someone said like, hey, here's this juicy cash cow of Britney Spears that you could bilk for $500 an hour, I'd like to think the ethical part of me would still reject it, but that's the true heart of a lawyer. We're all about justice and peace and all this, and then we slap you with a $500 an hour bill. That's cheers to lawyers. Anyway, so the cynical side of me really thinks that it's the dad and the lawyers that are keeping the charade going. And it might be, maybe it's not a charade. The problem is that the court has sealed all of the records. Normally these are public proceedings, so the initial petitions and some of the stuff is in the public domain, but the court has sealed the records, so it's hard to tell, all right, what is the dad still continuing to tell the court to allow the court the conservatorship to persist. Anyway, so that's the case of Britney Spears. Cynics could say that this is just lawyers and a greedy dad. Others could say it's a way to help a woman who is incapable of helping herself. I personally think that after, 16 years, 13 years, 12 years, however long it's been, what is it, 2008? I'd like to think after 13 years, a healthy, young, relatively young woman. Am I young? Because she's about the same age as me. Am I young, ladies? Yeah. They say I'm young. Great. I'm young! So Britney Spears is still young. She's still young. We're in the same milieu, right? So I'd like to think that a young, healthy woman can take care of herself, and if she needs help, she can ask for it. So that's the analysis. I'm almost done with this apple martini, and now I will rate the apple martini. It wasn't so good at first, but after I've taken a couple of drinks, it all goes down the same. It makes you feel just as happy. Cheers to happiness, and cheers to your family. Tastes like Britney.